Red Men in Gas Buggies. The Tale of an Auction with $1,000,000 Bids by Sherman Rogers, industrial correspondent of The Outlook. The Outlook, August 22nd, 1923. The newspapers a few months ago announced that on April 5th, 1923, the right to prospect and lease oil lands on the Osage National Reservation in Oklahoma would be thrown open to the public, and leases sold to the highest bidder. To the layman, this announcement savored of the old Louisiana lottery. Not so. True, every man paying a bonus for the exclusive right to prospect on certain leases takes a gamble, and in some cases, the gamblers have lost. Not many, however, in the Osage Nation. It may seem peculiar, but at the time the Indians were rounded up from various parts of the country, banded together, and transplanted onto what was then believed to be a desert district in Indian Territory, it was thought that this was the end of the Indian. They couldn't raise anything, and, as an early United States Marshal in the Indian Territory remarked, "When the Indians have finished eating their dogs, they'll starve to death, and cease to be a further worry to Uncle Sam." But it didn't work out that way. Lo and behold, these same lands are today extremely rich in natural resources. The best coal, gas, and oil deposits in the state are located on the old Indian reservations, and the Indian, instead of starving to death when he finished with his dogs, now rides around in the best of motor cars and enjoys a steady income that turns bankers green with envy. Automobiles of exclusive makes, not the other kind, are about as scarce among the Osage Indians as candidates at a political convention. The streets of Pawhuska, Oklahoma, where the Osage Indian sale is held, not only boast of, but actually have at all times of the day, stalwart redskins stalking about with solemn faces, powerful physiques, and blankets. But these Indians are not waiting to jump on the back of bucking cayuses. No, not in 1923. They just naturally stalk across the sidewalk, step into high-powered limousines, sink back on the plush-covered cushions, and command, "Home, James." The morning I arrived in Pawhuska, I learned, from first-hand information, of an Indian squaw with a blanket wrapped around her driving up to the Indian commissioner, stepping out of the luxurious closed car, walking boldly into the commissioner's office, and coming out with 25 $1,000 bills in her hand. She counted them over as she recrossed the sidewalk, stepped into her car, and instructed the chauffeur to take her back to her Osage Indian home. Douglas Fairbanks couldn't have performed the stunt better, nor more coolly. But the Osage Indians are not the leading actors in the tense drama held once or twice a year in the little theater on the main street of Pawhuska, where one of the greatest auctioneers in the business sells from $8 to $10 million worth of chances to drill on Osage Indian leases. Tourists going through the cities of Oklahoma are too amazed to express their views while still in the state. They see modern cities, with every modern convenience, the very best of construction, with beautiful homes, and with schoolhouses without a peer, population considered, in the United States. The first remark the tourist makes, and one which was the first to come to my mind, is, "There must be some real 18-karat gold men behind all this development." The average city of Oklahoma breathes the spirit of vigor that we actually come in contact with only, as a rule, on the motion picture screen or in the bestsellers. I have often heard of Oklahoma enthusiasm, and I am certain, after associating with the individuals who have made Oklahoma famous, that these statements have never been exaggerated. We left Tulsa in the morning on a special train. Millionaires sat in the smokers, with oil drillers and small ranchers. There was nothing peculiar about this. Some of these men were going to Pawhuska to get a thrill when men started bidding in millions. Others with lean pocketbooks had a small parcel in mind, that could be purchased for a small amount that may make good. But everyone seemed to know everyone else. They were a friendly crowd, all good fellows. As they landed in Pawhuska, a beautifully built city of about 10,000 people, no time was lost. Everyone filed through the streets to the Constantine Theater, which was filled to capacity during the early bidding. George J. Wright, Indian Superintendent, who has seen 40 years of Indian service, opened the sale by announcing that this was the first time that both the Secretary of the Interior and the Commissioner of Indian Affairs had ever attended an oil sale. Secretary Hubert Work and Commissioner Charles H. Burke acknowledged the compliment from the platform with a nod. Mr. Wright announced that in the millions of dollars of business that had been transacted between the Indian agent and the oil lease purchasers, during which time 490,000 acres had been sold, valued at from $2 to $10,000 per acre, there had never been a question raised after the sales were concluded. And, he added, certainly no higher tribute could be paid to the honesty, good intent, and square dealing of those who bid such high stakes for their chance. Mr. Wright then introduced Secretary Work, who made a very brief address, stating, I don't know anything about the individual parcels that you men are going to bid in. It seems to me, though, that you are plenty able to take care of yourselves. The government, naturally, as guardians of the Osages, will get the very best price they can out of each lot sold. This is one place where you take all the chance, and Uncle Sam takes none, as we guarantee nothing. You will have to contend with the auctioneer, and it seems to me that he also is able to take care of himself. But I want to assure you that if you men make money on this gamble that you are about to take, the government or its agents wish you well. Commissioner Burke made a few remarks, complimenting the fairness, vigor, and vision of the men who asked no favors. Men who had built Oklahoma, and had made the tremendous incomes from these sales possible. Announcement was made that 23,680 acres would be sold, embracing 148 tracts. The small tracts would be sold during the forenoon, and the big ones in the latter part of the afternoon. By big ones, the auctioneer meant the Burbank Pool, which blew in less than 2 years ago, but since that time has taken its place with the greatest oil districts in the world. Announcement was made that 25% cash would be required directly after the bidding had closed. The sale was on. The first tract was knocked down at $500. The morning passed with spirited bidding on the small tracts. 30 had been sold, and 17 passed at noon. Just as the forenoon session closed, bidding became lively on one tract, which was finally sold for $52,000. There was a surprise on this tract. Most of the wise speculators who have a reputation for knowing their business remarked that on their own sheets they had this same tract valued at $17,000. I might add here that every bidder in the hall knew just how far he would go and not $1 more on each tract he intended to bid on. Men who put all their energy behind the bid up to $50,000 were absolutely cold and refused to bid $50,500. From that angle, they were not gamblers. Rather, they were men of keen vision who were pitting their knowledge of the oil fields against the knowledge of the other fellow. The afternoon session was called to order at 1:15. It was an entirely different setting. The hall was well filled. The galleries and advantageous boxes were occupied by holders, that is, men who would leave when the whales came in. The auctioneer explained that the minnows had been nibbling all morning, but soon the whales would start to bite. The major oil bidders did not file in until late in the afternoon. Tract 54 started the afternoon session at a price of $500. Many men in their shirt sleeves were in the back part of the room. Many full-blooded Indians looked on with great interest. This sale meant more to each individual of the 2,200 Osage Indians than the World Series receipts to the world's champions. There was a generous sprinkling of ladies. To my surprise, many of them had the appearance of having just stepped out of a modiste establishment on Fifth Avenue. That wasn't the only surprise. Most of the fair feminines were not only spirited bidders, but I noted that many of the more prominent oilmen continually leaned their heads to get the advice of their better halves. Another incident drew my attention. It is not, however, localized to Oklahoma. Whenever one of the oil bidders would lean over to get the advice of his better half and she shook her head, it meant no further bidding. At 2:10, a party from the Chatham and Phoenix Bank of New York caused a momentary flurry as they filed into the upper box, directly over the auctioneer's platform. As the 101st parcel is announced, the auctioneer remarks that George Miller of the 101 Ranch ought to bid on this tract, but the famous ranchman only smiles. The great background of large blueprints is now noticeable. Women down in front of the platform are deeply interested. At this juncture, a young woman in the first row becomes very active. She is coaching a spirited bidder who makes a try from the 103rd to 109th tract, but they fail to get any of them. As the 109th tract is passed, a giant Osage, fully 6 feet 6 inches tall, wrapped in a great, highly colored blanket, stalks into the rear of the hall. He gazes silently a few moments at the interested spectators, nods to the auctioneer, gazes a moment at the great crowd under the pale lights in the rear of the theater, and walks stoically out. "That boy is going to bring good luck," muttered a youthful Tulsa newspaper correspondent. As the 116th tract is passed, 3 women file into the rear of the room and gaze anxiously toward a man and woman in the third row. The latter dolefully shake their heads, and the quickly frozen smiles tell the story of loss to a higher bidder. The 5 quickly leave the hall. Bidding passes briskly on to the 170th tract, which sells for $20,000 to C.A. Lake. A real oil well is now put up, averaging about 60 barrels a day. There is a great deal of banter on this tract. "What kind of sand?" calls a bidder to the auctioneer. "Duke's mixture," is the reply, and the audience is convulsed with laughter. The well finally sells at $72,000. At 3:20, Wade Phillips takes a seat in the 4th row with Mr. Pringle, his right-hand man. He has one of the best locations in the building. There is a flutter among those present, due to the fact that Wade Phillips is one of the greatest and shrewdest oilmen in the Southwest, who plays a lone hand, owns all the stock in the companies he heads, refuses absolutely to be drawn into stock-selling schemes of any kind, and is in short one of the nerviest oil operators attending the oil sales. The audience at this point displays great interest in a gray-haired man walking down the side aisle. It is Senator Harold, the first Republican senator elected from Oklahoma, and one of the handsomest men that ever sat in the United States Senate. As the 340th tract is sold, the house is crowded, every seat taken, with fully 200 standing. There is a flutter of excitement now because the great Burbank pool will soon be reached, and this means large bids. L.E. Phillips arrives at 3:42. The gallery buzzes, because Phillip bids them up. Secretary Work breathes a sigh of relief. Phillips is known to love oil wells next to T-bone steak, and he is a noted connoisseur on the latter. The room now presents a striking figure. Many smartly attired women finish up the background in the rear of the hall. A striking beauty walks down the hall at 4:15, and the Associated Press correspondent at my right gasps. "Heavens," he breathes, "pinch me. And they call this the Wild West." The 3 Phillips brothers are now in the room. Earl Sinclair occupies the second box. The Carter Oil Company officials, with Mr. Young coaching, occupy the first box on the left. The Twin State Oil Company the second. W.G. Skelly, one of the most noted oilmen of Oklahoma, occupies the aisle seat of the 7th row to the right, the heads of the Gypsy Oil Company 1st row to the left, and the Prairie Oil Company 3rd row left. As the first tract is put up for sale, the auctioneer remarks, with a chuckle, "Same old crowd, the same old faces on the wall." SE 1626-6 opens, started by the Texas Oil Company. Phillips opposes. Lewis Friedman, mayor of Muncie, Indiana, joins in. The bid runs by $5,000, jumps quickly to $125,000, the Carter Oil Company taking the tract at $127,000. SW 1626-6. Sinclair starts at $20,000. Friedman against Sinclair to $60,000. Carter enters against Sinclair. Carter shakes his head at $290,000. R.M. Young, of Carter, then bids against Wade Phillips up to $360,000 when Phillips shakes his head. Skelly joins in at this point. Young immediately earnestly consults his advisors and runs the bidding up to $380,000. Young bids $385,000 and secures the tract. SW 1527-5. Bid opened by Skelly at $100,000, with Friedman opposing. John Alcorn of the Marlin Oil Company jumps the bid from $100,000 to $250,000 in one jump. The audience gasps. Sinclair quickly runs the bid to $325,000. Almost instantly, $375,000 is reached. There is a $50,000 jump here by Skelly. Sinclair goes to $500,000. Skelly goes to $525,000. Sinclair makes it $530,000. Skelly throws the house in an uproar by bidding $531,000. Alcorn jumps it to $600,000. Skelly snaps back, $625,000. Sinclair enters, and Skelly, Alcorn, and Friedman all drop out. With the precision of the tick of the clock, the auctioneer raises his right hand and drops it, and each time by a nod of the head, Sinclair and Carter raise $5,000 at a time, until $800,000 is reached. Young now shakes his head. Sinclair looks dubious. Skelly confers with his advisors. The house has now grown very tense. Even Secretary Work, whose face has been a mask up to this time, rubs his nose. The tract is sold to Sinclair at $800,000. SE 15275. Pugh of the Sun Oil Company startles the audience by opening the bidding on this tract at $650,000. Young enters the bidding at $705,000. Pugh against Young to $850,000. Phillips versus Young from $855,000 to $900,000. Phillips evidently wants this tract. Mr. Pringle is doing the bidding for Wade Phillips, who sits by his side. The auctioneer, with the staccato shout of a Gatling gun and almost as rapid, goes at $5,000 jumps from $1,100,000 to $1,300,000. Young bids a little more uncertainly up to $1,320,000. Phillips nods his head very vigorously at $1,325,000. Young throws up his hands, and the tract goes to Wade Phillips. This tract proved to be the highest priced lease of the afternoon. NE 22275 opens by a bid from Young at $400,000. N.K. Moody of the Prairie Oil sang out $600,000. The two quickly bid to $800,000. There is a momentary lull, then monotonously the auctioneer again starts singing, $25, $30, $35, $40, and up to $925,000. The auctioneer asks Moody to go to $1 million. He nods his head. Young comes back at $1,025,000. The house is in an uproar. The poker face was never so set and expressionless so far as inward feeling was concerned. Then Moody smiles. Carter is very serious. I glanced back at Secretary Work. He never moved an eyelash. Moody drops out, and the tract goes to Carter for $1,025,000. Senator Harold remarks at this juncture that men who will pay $1 million for the right to drill for oil certainly are entitled to anything they make if they make it. The remarkable feature of the oil leases is in the fact that the gigantic sums paid by the bidders represent only a bonus. If they strike oil, 16% of the gross value of every gallon taken out goes to the Osage Indians, while the bonus alone will give $4,000 each to every man, woman, and child in the tribe, with more dizzy thousands pouring in when oil wells are drilled. SE 2227 opens at $400,000. Phillips of Phillips Petroleum, Skelly and McClintock of the Gypsy Oil Company make a spirited three-cornered bid on this tract to $410,000 in less than 2 minutes. Then monotonously, the bidding went from $413,000 to $480,000 between McClintock and Skelly on $1,000 raises. It goes by $1,000 raises to $500,000. The audience is both gasping and laughing. It appears to me that the lady in front, who has interested me all afternoon, hasn't breathed for minutes. Now she does with a short, jerky breath, as the bidding proceeds by $1,000 raises to $542,000. The auctioneer begs them to bid them up. The lady in front now interests me greatly. I am almost certain that she hasn't breathed for at least 5 minutes. Phillips and Skelly both are in consultation with the men around them at this point. Phillips bites his cigar in half, but I suppose he feels that he might just as well lose a quarter after making a $1,325,000 bid. The tract goes to $583,000 by $1,000 bids. The crowd is now getting restless. It goes to $595,000. Secretary Work is now frowning. The house is jammed at this time. Newsboys elbow their way in, selling news extras. Monotonously, the auctioneer's hand goes up and down to $670,000, the Gypsy Company securing the tract. NE 23275, sold to the Gypsy Oil Company, taking the tract at $1,195,000. NW 23275. The $600,000 mark was quickly reached between the Gypsy and Phillips Petroleum. They are bidding well now, jumping $50,000 at a time. Gypsy goes to $850,000 when Nelson Moody startles the house by bidding $950,000. Phillips raises, and Nelson Moody again sings out $1 million. They talk millions here, just like bootblacks talking about dimes. Phillips of the Phillips Petroleum takes the tract at $1,005,000. The next tract starts out with a $200,000 bid between Skelly and Moody. The bid is quickly run to $625,000. Moody wants a tract, and has so far been unsuccessful. While I am taking out my lead pencil, the bidding goes to $735,000, with three-cornered bidding, Phillips Petroleum having entered at $650,000. The next bid by Skelly at $740,000 takes the tract. Tract 16, and last, starts with brisk bidding. Two bright-eyed women sit next to Nelson Moody. They have coached him all afternoon. I know one must be Mrs. Moody, because he always agrees when she shakes her head emphatically. I am a married man and know the sign. Phillips and Moody are the bidders on the last tract. They want to get it over with, and do quickly, Phillips winning out. The great crowd quickly files through the street to the special trains, and in a few moments, small groups of local people can be seen on every street corner. The special pulls out, and I hear on my right, "Phew, the Pawhuska sale is no place for a weak or fluttering heart, and mine flutters every time I think of those $1 million bids."